Okay, welcome to the live stream for June 13th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome. And let me see here. There's the chat. Hi, Dawn is here. Jenny is here. Welcome, welcome. Lauren. Hello. How's everybody's week going? So I heard in the comments last week about the chat from last week that like a solid hour, the first hour was missing. So I don't know if that was still like uploading when those people watched it, or if that is indeed the case. I guess I need to go back and watch it. But if that is the case, I will go ahead and re-upload the full live stream tomorrow if I need to. So thanks for letting me know when there are technical issues. And let's see, Andrew says, hello from Colorado. Hello, Andrew. I was just in Colorado a few weeks ago. I was in Fort Collins, which is my old stomping ground. I love that town. Unfortunately, I don't know anybody that still lives there. Everybody's moved, but it's still a cool city. So I guess you guys probably heard in the news about there were two very prominent suicides in the celebrity world. Anthony Bourdain, I cannot pronounce his last name correctly. I apologize. And Kate Spade. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about suicide, I guess, tonight. And just to open with that, you know, a lot of people, especially after they go through something so emotionally devastating, like abuse of any kind, a person can get really low really fast, and that low can very quickly become their new normal. And I just want you to know that if that's something that you're struggling with, that you're not alone, and that there are many free resources out there. So I strongly encourage you, you know, there's suicide 1-800 numbers available in the United States and in the UK that they're 24 hours, you know, 365 days a year. You can Google them to get those numbers. I will post them at the end when this live stream uploads. I'll post them down below in the comments if anybody's interested in those numbers. There's also a text line here in the US. I believe it's 741-741 that you can text, and just if you're not comfortable talking on the phone to somebody, you can text back and forth. And it's just another tool in our toolkit that we can utilize. And I also encourage you, if you are feeling that low, to consider reaching out and getting professional help, whether that might mean therapy, whether that might mean seeing a psychiatrist or your family doctor. There's definitely a time and place for medication, and there's no shame in that. I think you need to do what you need to do. And if you're noticing changes in your personality, we talked a little bit about this in the live stream. I believe it was yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday with Angie. And I was talking to a guy in the chat last night about feeling really low. You know, if you're noticing, let me back up. I think a lot of people think that depression just means this feeling of sadness. And that's one way that people experience depression, but that's not always the case. So feeling numb, having a loss of interest in things that you previously enjoyed, noticing changes in like your sleeping and your eating and your weight, noticing changes in your environment, noticing changes in just your level of motivation to want to get out there and do things, or just basic self-care kind of stuff. These can all be signs of depression. So if you're feeling like every single day you're having to swim upstream, or that life is just becoming increasingly difficult, these are all some signs to talk to somebody about, to call a doctor or your mental health professional and to reach out and get help. A lot of times, if price is a concern, a lot of professionals do work on a sliding scale. So this might be something to just consider. Okay, so with that said, let's see what's going on in the chat. Oh, I'm so sorry, Harmony. Harmony says, hi, Dana and everyone. I just had to put my 12-year-old Australian Shepherd to sleep. She was with me through all the narc abuse and the recovery. I decided I couldn't stay any longer when my ex threatened to, quote unquote, leave the gate open when we lived near a busy highway. She was the one who got me out. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, animals are just, man, they're just wonderful. They can teach us so much about what it really means to appreciate and just love somebody else. And they can just be such a gift. And I'm so sorry that you're going through that. That's intense. And I hope that you're able to find the support that you need during this time. Okay, let's see here. Okay, people are hopping on the chat. So welcome. And also I wanted to mention too, we're reading my second book, the Out of the Fog book, for book club for this month. We're going to be discussing it the last Thursday of this month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when the book club is going to air. And so if you have any questions about that, anything, questions, comments, concerns, frustrations, then would be the right time to bring them up, and we can discuss anything that you'd like to about the book. It's interesting, when you publish a book and you kind of put it out there in the world, it's such a different experience than publishing a video. And I guess it's because I could always do like a response video, or I could clarify things in the comments, whereas with books, that's not so easy to do. So there's been a couple of takeaways that I've had from publishing this book. And probably the most recent takeaway has been over the past few days where that book, the Out of the Fog book, has received 2 1-star reviews, which is, I'm not going to lie, that stings a little bit, but I'm always appreciative of sincere feedback, even if it's a 1-star, but I think what I took away from with that was it would be nice to have maybe some more people to test read a book after I finish it, just to see. Because, obviously, when you write a book, you're sitting there alone with your thoughts and your perspective on things. And I do try to cover a lot of ground. And I do multiple read throughs when I write a book. And I try to think about things in different ways. Like, how is somebody going to think about this if they're new to the topic? How is somebody going to think about this if they've been here for a while? Like, I really want to make sure that I'm providing value in my books. It's, my goal isn't just to publish a book, it's to actually have people to hopefully provide some like insight and to shave years off of you guys' learning curve. So, I'm totally open to feedback on that. So I don't know. That's what I'm kind of kicking around. I don't know how to necessarily go about creating a group for test readers, but if that's something that you would be interested in, reading a book before I publish it and giving your feedback, you would need to be able to read it in probably less than a month and then be able to give, of course, you would be getting a free copy. I would normally prefer to do ebooks because that way I can just send you a link to them. But if need be, I could send out a paperback. We could figure something out. I could send out a paperback if need be. Or I could send one out anyhow. It's just a thank you. But it would be nice to hear kind of what other people have to say about points that they would want me to cover in more detail, or even ideas for books. So just throwing that out there. Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. Andrew says, hi, I just found your channel and your book Out of the Fog, and it's amazing. It helped me understand a lot about the narc, how the narc mind works. Cool. Yeah, that makes me happy. It's so rewarding. It's such an emotional roller coaster when you put content like videos or especially books out into the world, because with a book, I can't, and not that I would do this with a video, but you can't stand there and kind of justify, you can't stand there to justify what you wrote. You have to kind of release it out into the world and then hope for the best. But you also can't answer any questions. And I don't want to come across as like looking over somebody's shoulder who writes because I mean, I'm on Amazon more often than I would like to admit. I buy way too much stuff from Amazon. I buy everything from Amazon. So, and I try to write reviews on everything that I buy. And it would weird me out if the seller of that product responded to me, especially if I left a bad review. So I don't want to like weird anybody out or like call them out. I figure people leave reviews and I'll just leave that alone, because I think reviews are more for other potential readers or other potential buyers, and not for the seller, not for the author or the seller of the product. So I don't know. It's just a weird kind of space to be in. So, and reviews really do matter, especially on Amazon. So if you have read the book, and like I said, I really do appreciate any sincere review, any sincere feedback, whether you want to leave that on Amazon or whether you want to tell me any feedback or whatever on a video comment or in a message or what have you. It's warmly welcomed. I feel like not even half, like probably it's a solid 80% of my understanding of narcissistic abuse comes from the community. You know, like I had my own experiences, but everybody experiences this stuff in different ways and to different degrees. And so all of my both like personal and professional experiences with this are still rather limited. It's just my stuff. And so hearing from everybody else, it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about it that way. Or, you know, it's so eye-opening. Dandelion. Okay, that would be awesome. Dandelion says, I used to edit. I would be happy to read. That would be fantastic. And let's see here. Oh, great question. Adela asks, Dear Dana, you experienced a great loss recently. So did I. You lost your house. I had my flat flooded in a storm. I lost half of my stuff. I wanted to ask you, what is resilience and can it be learned? Resilience is one of my favorite concepts in all of this and in psychology in general. And I think absolutely it can be learned. And so resilience, there's kind of, I think most people, all people, have our own kind of baseline level of resilience. I think it starts off by and large as just a part of a person's personality, like how introverted, how extroverted a person is. Some people are just more resilient than others, but resilience is definitely something that can be learned. And unfortunately, I think one of the main ways that people become resilient is by struggle and overcoming. And the more we struggle, the more we overcome, the more resilient we are. So what might have, leveled you 5 years ago might be just a pebble in your shoe now. And I will say that's kind of one of the strange outcomes from our house fire is I feel I have gone through so much in my life, like a lot of like probably most people, right? And at this point in the game, I just feel like, man, I have like the time that it takes me to bounce back from something becomes less and less with every major event. because it's sort of like, I've been here before. I have perspective. I know that this isn't, even though it feels like this bomb went off in my life, like it's just a chapter in my book. It's not my whole life. Whereas I think most of the time, the first time somebody really has something major happen in their life, it's I think trauma, it's like this flash bulb that goes off and we lose all perspective, and it just feels like that defining moment in our life. And it can take a little time to realize, okay, this is not just like the trauma of your life. It's just a trauma in your life, and that life it's kind of a series of traumas and triumphs, and we just kind of move through it, sort of like on a smaller level. People talk about, oh, you've got to grow a thick skin. And that what they don't tell you is that a thick skin is really scar tissue, and it's developed through a series of events, through like these little, 1,000 little cuts, and that's how you develop that scar tissue over time. That was something that I was thinking about when I saw, I had these 2 1-star reviews, and that just, it bummed me out. And so I spent, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 hours today. And I knew, I'm like, I just, you know what? I just have my feelings a little hurt, and I'm just kind of feeling, just kind of took the wind out of my sails for a little bit. I know that I'll be fine. 1 stars is it's part of it, right? It's in my author group. It's, people joke, they're like, you're not a real author until you get your first 1-star review. So it's just part of the process. And it makes me glad in a way that I got 2, because I can't even imagine, had I been the kind of author that maybe put out a book and it became this like huge phenomenon, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you've got hundreds or thousands of people just shredding your work and leaving 1-star reviews, and really just personal attacks on your appearance and on your ability as a writer, and just all kinds of stuff. Like, that would be so devastating. And so I guess the point of that is, we go through these events, and then we kind of have to regroup, and then we go through more events, and then we regroup, and then we go through more. And so I think resilience is realizing that a lot of this resilience in general just takes practice. And it's practicing positive coping skills. It's practicing, I think, trying to be calm in the middle of a storm, no matter how severe that storm is in your life, and keeping perspective and making the decision. Okay, so in my house fire, after that happened, my brain was, my thoughts were everywhere for about a solid, probably like 2 weeks. And I was in a deep funk, and I just needed to be alone. I just needed to think about things. And I wasn't even sure what I needed to think about. I just needed to be alone and process kind of what happened. And I realized around that time, because I was so concerned, I'm like, I had PTSD. I still have PTSD, but I had PTSD before, and that started about like 7 or so years ago. And it was pretty severe for about a year. And of course, as time goes by, it becomes more manageable. There's still some stuff there for me, but it's manageable. But I was so scared about what that event was going to do, what the fire was going to do to my ability to kind of stay grounded. And I was so I was so afraid of like backsliding, and like, man, what is my brain going to do with this? And how much of my progress is going to be undone? And one of the aha moments that I had from that was realizing I needed to very quickly decide kind of what this fire was going to mean for me, instead of letting the chips fall where they may and let my brain decide how I was going to come out on the other side of this. Like, I had to decide ahead of time, okay, this is what this is going to mean for me. And so I'm choosing to take away the fact that, I feel like I have a new lease on life. I mean, I got incredibly lucky, just lucky that I was able to get out. And so instead of, I think, focusing on all of the stuff that was lost, like, man, I was so fortunate to have to walk away from that with my life, and Travis is okay. And now the cats are okay. Like, everything that's important is okay. Now it's just rebuilding. And so trying to just kind of make the most of it and just realize this is going to be an adventure. It's None of this is ideal. It's all very inconvenient, but it is what it is. And we're just going to make the most of it and move forward. So, but yeah, I love the concept. If you're interested in the concept of resilience and kind of how we make meaning and the importance of making meaning in adversity, there is kind of a new focus in psychology called positive psychology. And there's also a term out there. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. And I love this term so much. It's called post-traumatic growth. And it's this massive level of growth that tends to happen, I think maybe perhaps only happens after trauma, hence the name, right? Post-traumatic growth. So I love the concept. So the original kind of concept with psychology was that people, we have a baseline of kind of our personality and how we relate to the world. And so more traditional approaches to psychology was to kind of figure out where this base for, where each person's baseline was, and then to help them basically get to that baseline. So if they weren't doing well, so if they were really depressed or if they were feeling anxious, they would be considered to not be at their baseline. Like, this is abnormal behavior for them. And so there was a lot of focus on getting people back up to their baseline. Well, the focus of positive psychology is like, hey, you know what? Let's move the baseline. Just because maybe their baseline was just not that great to begin with. Maybe it was just kind of getting by through life. Like, let's just blow the roof off of this and create a new and empowering normal, and really focus on all of the growth that can come from trauma. And I love that. I think that's so incredibly powerful. So, okay, let me scroll up here. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. And I am so sorry to hear about your flood. And yeah, I get it. The rebuilding process is a tough one. Let's see. Missouri Cowboy is here. Welcome. Okay, this chat's going fast tonight. Oh, absolutely. Missouri Cowboy says, yes, unfortunately, some trauma occurs suddenly without warning. There's no hardening process. It can flatten, nearly destroy, or destroy the human. That is when we need support from others. 100%. And I think that's the shock of it all. When we have kind of these smaller upsets in life that I wouldn't say that are necessarily traumas, right? These kind of smaller upsets, the benefit of that is it can help prepare us for anything larger that's going to come downstream. But if the waters are fairly still, and then all of a sudden it's like we're going over Niagara Falls, a person's in this tremendous amount of upheaval, and it really just kicks the chair out from underneath you. It's really difficult to find being centered in all of that. So there's a saying in Buddhism, something along the lines of be kind, because some people have suffered too much, and be kind because some people have not suffered enough. And I think they're talking about more in terms of pain. And pain is such a catalyst for growth. And for those people that haven't ever suffered anything, there is no getting out of this life without experiencing pain. And if they've gone through life and everything has been, a fairly easy ride, and then something happens, they don't have the coping skills for that. And they don't have the perspective for that. I think my aunt, her best friend married her high school sweetheart, and they were married for like, I don't even know, 50 plus years. I think it might have even been her first boyfriend. And then he died suddenly. And it just rocked her world because that was all she'd ever known. She had never lived alone. She had never really ever been single. She had not, I mean, there's so many things that she had never experienced because she'd only been in like this one relationship her whole life. And that must be incredibly difficult to go through something like that, where there's no perspective, there's no, you've never had a heart broken before. For me, that's so foreign. I can't even imagine how difficult that would be. So, okay, let's see. Postmodern is talking about hoovering. And she says, telling somebody not to respond to hoovering is not enough. You have to tell them why not and what to do instead. Yeah, I would agree. I think most people, right? If most people, like, they understand the truth and they understand clarity when they hear it. And so if we can explain the why behind something and it makes sense to them, then it's so much easier to see it for what it is and to not get caught up in it. Because, and you guys have seen this, you probably experienced this just like I've seen it and I have experienced it. Whereas if you don't have that why, it's really easy to get kind of tangled up in the bushes thinking, well, maybe this person, you get focused on, are they a narcissist? Are they not a narcissist? And how do you know this is hoovering? Maybe this is something else. And, but if you understand, like, kind of, this is the cycle of abuse, this is what they do, talk is cheap and easy, and that's their main tool, and the love bombing and everything else, and things just don't change. And then letting the person know, you know here are the tools, like, here's the cycle, here's what love bombing is, here's what the devalue is, here's how this cycle goes. If your relationship continues to follow this cycle, then they're not changing. And so then at that point, you have to get clear on, like, where your deal breakers are and where is your line in the sand, and just be honest with yourself about that. People will leave when they're ready to leave, but helping them to kind of think through the situation and putting the ball back in their court of, like, hey, I don't have a vested interest in you leaving. It's not because I'm bitter or jaded or divorced or, don't want you to be happy or what have you. Like, you need to make up your own mind about this kind of stuff, but just know, like, here's how these things operate. And you'll know it either fits your situation or it doesn't. And I think 9 out of 10 times when they have that information, then they kind of sit with it and they're like, you know what, boy, this is really spot on. That's probably one of the more common emails and messages that I get from people, is they're like, you know what, I had all this doubt. And then I began watching all these videos and talking to other people in the chat, talking to you. And it was just that clarity, because they're like, there's no way that you could have known my situation. You don't know me, and you're describing everything to a T. So, and here's the thing is, what we're talking about, either kind of it fits or it sounds totally crazy. For people that have never been tangled up with a manipulative person, all of this, like, it doesn't sound real. It just sounds so far-fetched. But if you're in a crazy situation, odds are you're in a crazy situation because you're going to YouTube and you're trying to look up information on how did things get so crazy. Okay. Oh, real quick. Okay. James is talking about the pebble in your shoe thing. And I think a big part of resilience, or at least there's just different tools in your toolkit, One of my favorites is visualization and paying attention to the words that you use. So the words that we use can really shape our reality and shape our perspective of the situation. So if we're viewing this, if you're viewing whatever it is that you're going through, so like I was saying with the house fire, I'm like, yeah, you know what, 2 weeks, that really rocked my boat. I was able to identify that. I'm like, you know what? I need to take a time out and just regroup. I don't feel like I'm thinking clearly. I'm not even sure if I should be driving. Like it just really rocked my world. And I just need to kind of regroup. And then I began trying to frame it to myself in a way of, you know what, now that everybody's safe, now this is just going to be this new adventure of rebuilding. And now it's just going to be, it's an adventure. It's the next chapter. So kind of framing it in that way helps to make it more of just the next chapter. It's a more positive event. It's just what's coming up next. So the language that we're using, are you viewing the situation as, oh, it's this tremendous mountain that I have to climb, or is this a pebble in your shoe? And there's nothing wrong. If it truly is a mountain that you have to climb, that's okay. But sometimes we can use really exaggerated language for things that aren't that momentous, or monumental. And then it can make this whole thing feel just like this massive undertaking when maybe it's not. So visualization, trying to visualize the situation, visualize yourself in the situation, just positive imagery, getting a mantra. One of my favorite mantras was, I need to write this down because I feel like I've mentioned this a few times and I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. Had to do something with saying, I can handle it. Yeah, I think that was it. Like saying, I can handle this, or I'm getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, I can handle this. Like, I can handle this. And just that reassuring yourself of, yeah, you can get through. You're going to get through this one way or another, right? So we might as well try to give it the most empowering meaning possible. Okay, let me scroll up here. Okay, Kelly, that's a great question. It says, hi, Dana. I have been in a similar situation to Andrew's. What can you recommend about avoiding the hoovering and how to grow in self-love to no longer attract narcissists? Okay, so there's a couple of really great points that you mentioned that I want to touch on. So, avoiding the hoovering, if you can set yourself up for success as much as possible. So that might mean blocking their phone number. That might mean changing your phone number. Because if you block them, they can always, and most of the time they'll try to contact you from a number you don't recognize. If that's going on, even though it's not fair, even though it's not convenient, sometimes just for the peace of mind, you might have to change your phone number. You might have to change your Facebook profile, or your Instagram or your email. And it, maybe just for like the next 6 months or so until you're feeling more emotionally centered to where them trying to contact you doesn't knock you so off center. So knowing what you have control over, what you don't have control over, and you can set up, so you could try in the meantime. So if you have social media profiles and they're trying to contact you, blocking them, blocking all of their friends. I think you can turn off messages on Facebook. So just not even accepting messages, taking a different way to work, not hanging out at the same places so that they know, okay, there's a really solid chance they could show up there and run in, quote unquote, run into you by accident. So just kind of changing up how you do things can really make it a lot easier to avoid the hoovering. Writing out your for when you miss him or her list. And so putting on there in bullet points basically every reason as to why you don't want to go back. So, they lied about having a dog. They cheated on me with multiple times. They have a really bad temper. I can't bring up any conversation with them. Like nothing ever gets resolved. Like you just make this bullet point list. And so when if you are feeling weak or vulnerable, or you miss them, you're lonely, you're bored, and you're like, well, maybe they weren't that bad. Maybe we could just be friends. Maybe, and then they text you, or you just have this moment of weakness and you text them, kind of thing. If you can have that list, then you can help to use that to interrupt your pattern. So then you can go to that list and quickly scan it and realize, oh, right. Right. That's why I can't go back. I can't be friends with this. I cannot have this person in my life because this is insanity. Like everything that they do is, I'm not dealing with a person who is in reality. They're just pathological, deeply disturbed people. And I can't have that in my life and have inner peace at the same time. So getting clear with yourself. So, okay, the second part of that is how to grow in self-love. And then you also mentioned to no longer attract narcissists. So how to grow in self-love to no longer attract narcissists. I'm going to pull those two concepts apart because I don't think that they're connected. We all attract a wide variety of people through our lives. And it doesn't mean, it's not so much about who you attract, because that's a wild card. I mean, you're going to attract just a wide range of people. Some are going to be awesome. Some are going to be absolutely horrible. It's not about who you attract. It's more about who you're attracted to and how long you let people stay in your life. So, if you find another manipulative person that comes into your life, which, there's a solid chance that that will happen because they are out there. Don't get so down on yourself and think, oh no, I need to really work on my self-love. I need to really get back into therapy. I need to examine all of these unhealed childhood wounds. I need to just examine my navel more. I need to figure this out. Because if you're thinking that getting all those pieces in place will somehow serve as like this kind of like magical amulet that keeps narcissists away, it doesn't. Narcissists aren't attracted to people. They're attracted to supply. So it doesn't, they're not necessarily even attracted to like empaths. It's supply. It's based on sex, power, the ego, money, you name it. So they just see people as Kleenex, and then they use them and then they throw them away. So I've come across so many people that are so confused by this because they're like, hey, I do not fit. I'm a high-powered CEO of a company, or I'm a pretty much like an alpha kind of guy. Like, I don't get how I got caught up in this. Like, I call it like it is. I've never stayed in a relationship like this. I had an amazing childhood. I don't understand how this could have happened to me, especially because so much of the information out there talks about, okay, if you grew up with a narcissist as a parent or whatever, that can be part of the puzzle for sure. It's more about if you grew up with healthy boundaries, healthy standards, understanding deal breakers, understanding your tuition. And frankly, I don't think anybody grows up with that. So sure, having like an ideal childhood, being taught about self-love, that can give a person a leg up, but that's not a magical amulet to like warding off energy vampires. There is no, the only solution to that is to really, make sure that your boundaries and standards and deal breakers are all in place. So if because they will slide in under your radar, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. One of the other books that we read a while ago used a great analogy, something along the lines of, manipulators come in a wide variety of forms, and it's kind of it's important that people understand that it's just because you might have experienced it in one way, like your ex might have been very overt, difficult, demanding, aggressive, arrogant, like quote unquote, that guy or that girl. But the next manipulator could be a little old lady who seems incredibly nice and friendly. And then you start noticing things start taking a turn. They come in all different shapes and sizes. So And the book had used the analogy of something like, it's important that you understand something along the lines of like what a bird is, because if you only think of a bird as a peacock, you're going to be shocked when you see a swan. And it's that way with narcissists, like understanding just the wide range of problematic people out there. And that really does come with practice and kind of refining it. So you might, your first relationship you might have stayed in for 10 years and been dragged through hell. Now that you have so many more of it, this understanding and these tools in your toolkit, and you understand kind of what manipulation is, and you have the right understanding as far as like beliefs about what commitment is, understandings about what codependency is, understandings about what what family is, and that it's okay to walk away from a problematic situation, and all of these things, which the book that we're going to be discussing at the end of the month, the Out of the Fog book, that's that book. So I refer to those kinds of things as thought holes. And a thought hole is a lot like a pothole, but for your thinking. So if you're going along through life and you hit a thought hole, boom, next thing you know, you're off in a ditch, and you might not realize how you got there. So it's important because it only takes one kind of faulty belief. If a person thinks, oh, well, family's forever. Okay, well, what if you have a really dangerous and destructive person in your family? Like, to what end is family forever? Like, how much destruction are you going to allow them to do in your life, Or the difference between commitment and codependency. And there's just the difference between being friendly and being a friend. All of those topics I sort through because I see this time and time and time and time again. And I lived it. I went through it and I got caught up in all of these thought holes time and time and time again. And what can be so dangerous about this stuff is a lot of these thought holes are commonly accepted and they're seen as good. It's really good that you that you forgive and that you allow this person back into your life. That somehow makes a person compassionate and spiritual. And it doesn't. It's a sign of poor boundaries. And it's not being forgiving. It's just being foolish, But if we don't have that clarity and nobody's pointing it out, then our lives are going to keep not working for us. So that's the whole attraction to narcissist things. So the more you get out there, you're interacting with people, your eyes are open, you're seeing this kind of stuff more clearly, you're understanding what manipulation is, what abuse is, what a problem is, you're tightening up your boundaries, you're going to get the wrong people off of the bus a lot sooner than you did before. The first relationship might have taken 10 years. This time around, it might take 6 months. It might take 6 weeks. It might take 6 days. It might take 6 hours. It might even take 6 minutes. But the added part to that with getting these kinds of people out of your life is you have to get so grounded in who you are that you could be in a whole room full of well-intended people, because that's oftentimes the case. You might be in a room with your therapist, your priest, your next door neighbor that you adore, your best friend, and I don't know, your sister who you also adore. And everybody's telling you that person seems so great. I think it's just you. And if you know at the core that there's something off or that you're not comfortable, to be able to walk away and not need their validation or their approval, yes, indeed, this is not for me. I need to leave. So that's my goal for you, is for everybody here, is to be able to get so grounded in yourself that you're seeking counsel. You're open, you're listening to other people, but you're seeking counsel from within, and that you're able to be discerning enough to know kind of what's for you and what's not for you. So, okay, so then let's talk about self-love. Self-love is one of those kind of nebulous concepts out there that a lot of people tend to think like, oh, I guess like I don't hate myself, but no, it's not, the stuff's not taught. Like it's not even discussed. And so no wonder we're all kind of walking around lost in a paper bag. If I'm a big fan of this concept, because I think this helps to clarify it. Replace the word love with the word value. So how do you value yourself? How do you increase how you value yourself? And then, wow, what a game changer, right? So what are some ways that you can value yourself outside of like self-care kind of ways? Thinking about valuing yourself in terms of your time, your energy, and your emotions. So, for example, one of the biggest ways that I value myself is, and this was an absolute game changer for me, was really tightening up my boundaries and my deal breakers to where I don't do perpetual confusion or mental anguish. So if I am feeling like somebody took a magnet to my compass and I can't tell, is it them? Is it me? What's going on? I don't know. I'm losing sleep. I'm feeling panicky. It doesn't even matter if it's them or if it's me. That situation will never work because I can't feel that way. Like I can't go through life feeling that way. It's awful. It's, as you probably well know, I don't do that. And the thing is, I don't have those feelings around other people. It just tends to be certain people every now and again. And so it tends to be problematic people. So bumping that up, because I had somebody tell me years ago when I started my blog and my YouTube channel and everything, it was because of a relationship that, I mean, we went on, I shouldn't even say relationship. We went on a few dates and I felt like a magnet was taken to my compass. I was just like, I can't tell if this guy is amazing and if I have commitment issues or issues with men, or if this guy is really problematic and I'm not seeing things clearly. But in hindsight being what it is I was waiting around for concrete proof. And that, yes, indeed, this person was a raging lunatic. Like that I had suspicions that they were. And so somebody told me, they're like, you know what, Dana, you've been down this road before. You've seen this movie. You don't need to wait until the very end to get up and leave. And I hadn't realized that before. I felt judgmental for leaving without concrete proof. So it was just like this light bulb went off. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. I can rein things way in. And when things start to get all squirrely, that's going to be my new sign to leave. So that was a big self-care way for me to like love myself and to value myself is I value. And so now you've probably heard me talk about valuing your safety, valuing your sanity. So when I talk about valuing your sanity, that's what I'm referring to. Just making that your new standard of, you know what, hey, I don't do mental anguish, high anxiety, um, awful situations. Ooh, sorry, the cat just jumped up in the window. Kitty, I didn't even see you were in here. Oh gosh. Like I don't do those kinds of situations for any length of time because I value my emotional health. How do you valuing your time? Here's another example, valuing your time. In big ways and in little ways, not getting roped into gossip at work, not getting roped into, just unnecessary conversations that just suck your time that you don't want to have. Getting roped into doing things for other people that you really don't want to do, like getting roped in out of like fear, obligation, guilt, a habit even. It's kind of saying no when you mean no, saying yes when you mean yes is a big thing. And if you are going to be dating people, and I guess setting the pace is a big thing with valuing your time. It's like if you're dating a person, for example, instead of letting them set the pace, and even if they're like a really great person, if it's your first date, and if they're like, hey, I really want to go out for dinner and then I want to go out to a concert, and it's like this, marathon date, to be like, you know what, to value your time and realize, hey, you know what, you seem really cool. How about we just go out for coffee or a drink for the first date? Because that way you're not stuck someplace for 5 hours and they're not stuck either, right? So it's just valuing your time and setting the pace. So somebody wants to talk to you for, I don't know, 3 hours, or your mother wants you to come visit for a month, and you're like, you know what, really, like 4 days is my max. I can't do a month. That you're valuing your time to kind of put limits on things and letting people know, like, hey, I can't do a month, but I can do 4 days, and I would love to see you for 4 days. Or I can't talk on the phone for 3 hours, but I can talk on the phone for 20 minutes. Or I can't talk on the phone. How about we text? Whatever it might be. So those are just some ways to go about valuing yourself. Once we start valuing ourselves, and because that's also a way of setting boundaries, right? Once we start doing that, and we set the pace, and we're kind of holding to that, it's sort of like, hey, you know what, this is just what it either this is what works for me. It either works for you or it doesn't, right? And we can maybe negotiate a little bit, but not really. Like, this is just what works for me. People that try to push boundaries, when they try to push your boundaries and they don't get very far, they tend to just move on. And if they do stay in your life for any length of time and things start to get squirrely or difficult or whatever, you're like, hey, you know what? I just don't even do this because I value my time and my energy and my emotional health. And then you're gone. And it's a lot easier to walk away. I think it's a lot easier to walk away too after you've been through this once, because then you realize there's nothing there. Like, I'm walking away from smoke and mirrors, because you realize this is not a relationship. If the relationship we have is them always getting their way and pushing my boundaries and me giving in and being dragged through hell, then that's not a relationship or a friendship or anything else. Like, this is not workable. I might have feelings invested in this, but I'll kind of take my time to lick my wounds and nurse those hurt feelings and kind of grieve the loss of what I thought maybe could have been with this person, but I can't stay in that. Like, there's nothing to stay in. And I'm just postponing the pain by staying. So I hope that was a long answer. I hope that helps. Let's see here. Dandelion says, I have to figure out how to leave Amazon reviews pseudo-anonymously. I looked into this the other day because I was going to leave a review on something and I didn't want to have my name. You can go on there and I think there's like a down arrow next to your name. Like, when you go to leave a review, it'll say like, this review is posted as, and then it'll have your name and then like a down arrow. And you can actually go and like change your name for, I don't know if it's like a permanent thing on Amazon or if it's just for that review. But yeah, there's ways. Oh, Missouri Cowboy, he says, will you autograph the free copy? Please, please, please pick me. That was groveling for those who didn't notice. Missouri Cowboy, I would happily, you have been such a huge support of this show and everything that I've done. I would send you an autographed free copy regardless. So we can definitely touch base. There's a few people here. Doug, I don't know if he's hanging out, but I would love to send him a signed copy as well. And there's a handful, I mean, my goodness, there's a handful of other people here too that have just been here for a long time and have really contributed, and you're just very, very appreciated. We'll have to figure out how to organize something like that. Okay, well, that's good. Ingrid says, I've started reading Out of the Fog. I can't put it down. Awesome. That was my goal. But man, I tell you, it does rattle you when you get those 1-star reviews. Oh, thank you, Susan. She says, I'd be able to read ebooks to help support. That would be awesome. I would be curious. I think it would even be kind of fun to just have feedback from other people. Lucy was a big part of Out of the Fog. And you probably heard me talk about that before. She sent me It was close to 90 pages of notes. I don't, just FYI, I don't expect that from anybody like that. She went way above and beyond. And uh, like, I feel like I need to be washing her car and mowing her grass every day for the rest of my life. Like, she just was such a huge contributor to that book. And yeah. But yes, just getting feedback is huge. Let me scroll down here. Cha cha cha. Oh, chat just jumped here. Oh, well, thank you. Dandelion says, I thought Start Here was really helpful and insightful too, even though I wasn't at the starting point in this awakening when I began reading it. I still learned so much. Cool. I'm really glad. Yeah, it's hard. I think that's one of the hardest things with writing books is to kind of figure out where, because everybody's at different stages of understanding with this, and then of course healing with this. So the Start Here book, I'll show you guys. Got a copy. Is this book. And this one is for people that are brand new to this, to narcissistic abuse, to emotional abuse in general. It has a whole kind of glossary of terms. It's, the goal is I wanted a book to be able to pass to somebody else if they were confused and at the beginning stages, and just saying, like, read this and then let's talk, or check out some support groups and see what resonates best with you. And then the Out of the Fog book is this one, and it compares and contrasts a lot of the concepts and Start Here. And yeah, for clarity. Let's see. Oh gosh, Grace asked, Dana, where did you find the courage to write the book and tell the world about all of this? I find it extremely valuable information, but I also find it a little daunting to tell everybody about it. Yes. So, well, when I started my blog, I didn't think anybody would really read it. You know, I thought I had started blogs before, so this wasn't my first kind of rodeo with that. But and my blogs before never really, never really had any readers. And of course, I wasn't writing on a regular basis either, but it was, and I wasn't probably writing anything of interest. It was just kind of more my random thoughts about random things. And I shut those blogs down years ago. And I had a job where I had a lot of downtime at work, which is unusual for a psychiatric nurse, but I did. And I decided I'm going to start a blog about this. And I didn't even look at the numbers because I just figured it's just going to reach who it's going to reach. It wasn't even about like trying to get traffic or any of that. It was just, I just wanted to start a blog. And then I started the YouTube channel, again, thinking I had made some YouTube videos before about, again, random things, and they have maybe 100 views on them. So I really didn't think that anybody would like watch the videos. I felt like I was putting a message into a bottle and just throwing it out into the ocean and hoping that it would kind of wash up on the shores of whoever needed it. And when my YouTube videos, people began messaging me and, all of that started taking off. That was very, like debilitatingly anxiety inducing for me because I didn't anticipate that at all. And I'm more in person. I'm an introvert. I have a very kind of small group of friends. I like never in a million, I don't like pictures of myself. Like never in a million years did I think, oh, I would have a YouTube channel. Like that's so not my personality. And so it really took a lot for me. It would painfully it was really embarrassing for a while because I didn't, like I said, I didn't expect people to really watch my videos. And I thought that I would be able to keep my personal life and all of this stuff separate. And uh, I no, that didn't happen at all. Like I was accidentally publishing stuff to my homepage on Facebook, and I was accidentally, people like friends were commenting on stuff on Twitter, and I was like, what? How are they seeing this? I was like horrified. I was so embarrassed. And then I just had to realize, I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. And everybody knows, like, I didn't mean for them to know, but everybody knows my stuff. And I've got family members that really don't talk to me now because I've talked about family dynamics on the show before. It's seriously the elephant in the room when I'm around with family in general. So it's caused a lot of waves. Don't know if I would necessarily recommend people doing this. If you do, just realize that, just assume that everybody that you know is going to find out. And so plan accordingly. Like you might not want to use your real name. You might not want to ever show your face on your videos. If you write a book, you might want to use a pen name, or, definitely change names of people involved. That was another thing. Like, I didn't think anybody would watch my stuff, so I didn't change people's names. It's too late at this point. So I just, like, if legal issues come down the stream, then I'll handle them. That'll be another adventure. I mean, I don't know what else to do. Like, it's out there. So, but yeah, it's difficult. And it's just it's a journey. It's such a journey I think with any medium that you put yourself out there on. It's a different journey with each medium. So like YouTube is its own set of challenges and its own rewards. Like I love that I can respond to comments. I love that us chatting back and forth. I love being able to put any of my lessons learned and my pain to good use and hopefully help the next person, that they don't have to learn the hard way, So I love that. With a book, I will say, so I was one of the books that I'm currently working on that I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day for a couple different reasons. I don't know. It's a lot more in depth about my own story. And the goal of that book was the title was going to be, is something, I haven't landed on it yet, but it's going to be something like either 27 lessons learned or 37 lessons learned from dating a sociopath. And it's just going to be all of like what I feel are the top takeaways from all of this that I really hope that people learn. But I feel the best way to get that message across is through the lens of like my own journey to understanding and where I was so off track. The hard part is with writing a book like that. And I get it, because I'm an avid reader, people are going to respond, and I just don't know. That's hard. That's hard to just sit there and have rocks thrown at you, especially when it's your life and the pain is real. Like, it's mistakes that I've made and things that I've gone through. And I don't know if I, like how well I would handle that. And so I don't know. And I think about other authors, like the gal that wrote, Elizabeth Gilbert, the gal that wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She just, if you go look at her reviews on Amazon, man, they're just rough. Like it's a rough crowd out there. So that's impressive how somebody can just get that much criticism and keep going with it, So just things to think about if you're wanting to go public with this. There was a lot. There was probably at least, I've been doing this, about 3 years now, a little over 3 years, 3.5 years maybe. probably about 2 years of that where it really threw me for a loop. And I had, if you probably noticed, like I basically only do live streams now. I don't do filmed videos. And that's just anxiety. Like it's just weird. Like I have a really hard time doing shorter videos. The live streams, it's something that I've committed to, and it's like jumping off the high dive. I have all this anxiety before I hit go live, and it's like, okay, now you're in the pool and you're just going to be here and you're going to have fun, it's easier for me to do a live stream than it is to do a shorter video. So, okay, let me scroll up here. There was a question somebody had asked about, I want to find it, about toxic positivity. Cha. Where did that go? That was a really great question. Okay, hold on. Where did that question go? It was so good. I'm scrolling. If I can't find it here in the next 5 seconds, I'll just answer address, I should say, the part of it that I remember. Aha, I found it. Okay. Adela asks, Dana, do you believe in toxic positivity in a world of injustice? Isn't malignant positivity all about condemning and disrespecting the less fortunate, dismissing their reality and victim blaming? Yes. Well said. I think that's exactly it. And that's a very real thing. That is a topic that I don't think is addressed enough. And I see this more so in like law of attraction kind of communities where I'm in all kinds of groups because I just find it interesting. I find people's belief systems to be interesting. And then also I try to hold on to what helps and let the rest go. But I see this a lot in like different law of attraction communities where people will talk about, or they'll need to talk about abuse of some kind, or death, or some major life event that happened to them. And the whole kind of law, I think probably there's a lot of Scientology that feels kind of the same way of, you don't talk about that. You keep your vibration, your quote unquote, your vibration high. And because if you don't, then you're going to attract more negativity into your life. And, and then of course, yeah, that's it's incredibly victim shaming and victim silencing. And then I think too, even a lot of like kind of spiritual concepts, like the whole, again, kind of more in like the law of attraction community, like, oh, well, you attracted this to you, so it's all your fault that this happened. And so in that context, I think that's, obviously that's definitely a problem. There's certain components of law of attraction. Here's where it frustrates me, because like law of attraction kind of stuff, it's certain parts of it are based in like true psychology, but there's a lot of like pseudo science around it where things just take a turn and get really weird. So parts of that, like that kind of toxic positivity and like attracts like, and all of this, keeping your vibration high. And if things are still happening to you, it's because of like your vibration. The reality behind that, like the science behind that is I apologize if I'm kind of going off on a random tangent here, but the science behind that is there's a part of our brain called the reticular activating system. This part of our brain filters incoming information. And it also kind of sets what's important to us. So if you have something that's on your radar that's important to you, even if that's something that's important is something negative, like your ex, or something positive, like you just bought a brand new red Volkswagen, right? This is why you continue to see all of this stuff around you. You're like, man, there sure are a lot of red Volkswagens out there. Or, man, I keep hearing let's say your ex's name is Billy. I keep seeing people named Billy around me, or meeting people named Billy, or people that remind me of my ex. So it's still in that part of your brain it's set to scan on your radar. So that's what that's about. I think a more accurate understanding of law of attraction would be to consider it more of like law of selective focus, because that's what it is. It's when something's on our radar, our brain is seeking it out, and then it'll find it. We're not like manifesting that. It's already out there. So that's the thing, like the whole manifestation thing, that's where things get real screwy. Is you can, and here's another part of this, is there's a thing called confirmation bias. So where a person takes in new information and they use it to confirm their already existing information. Confirmation bias is a very real thing. It's why scientists will do like double-blind studies, because even though that they know that they're trying to remain neutral and impartial, they have a hypothesis, they're trying to test it, because confirmation, this is just the way that our brains are wired. We're wired to interpret incoming information to match our existing beliefs. Because that's such a real thing, they try to get rid of that as much as humanly possible, because it's really hard to get around, because our brains are just wired that way. So with law of attraction stuff, people are like, no, this works. I set an intention that I was going to manifest money, and I got a check in the mail for $25 from an old utility bill that I'd overpaid 5 years ago. See, that works. That's confirmation bias at work. So that check would have come regardless, right? Like a person overpaid a bill, they got a refund, but they're interpreting that event through this lens of this belief of law of attraction, thinking I manifested this. And it gives people a lot more control, or the sense that they are in a lot more control of their environment than they really are. That's where it can get dangerous. And that's how it can become victimizing, where people are like, you manifested that. So it's not like your energy that manifested that narcissist or that sociopath or that abuser in your life. There's like very real, like I can point to like understanding your intuition, boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. Those 4 things, like attracts like, in the sense of if I have really poor boundaries, then I'm going to be attracting a wide mix of people, probably a lot of other people that like to really push boundaries. It's just going to be a mixed bag. But until I fix that, no amount of trying to raise my vibration, staying positive, staying in the mood, staying appreciative, doing all of this stuff is going to stop sociopaths from coming into my life, because they're not coming in due to my vibration. If anything, that's more of a beacon of light to them, because the person's going to be that much more easy to manipulate, because they do a really good, because they can really come across as a person's soulmate. So if a person's like, and I had an acquaintance of mine recently who got caught up in this, and it's so awful now that all of our friends, we've all kind of like lost touch with her, because it's just this outrageous situation. She's so into, she made a vision board. And again, I'm into a lot of this stuff too, but like to a point. She made a vision board and was like, this is the person that I want to manifest. And I want him to be, have X, Y, and Z traits and all of these things. Well, then she meets this guy who comes across as Prince Charming, and she didn't question it. It's that confirmation bias again. She didn't question it because her vibration was high. She set her intention. In her mind, she's like, I manifested him. And all of us were like, honey, go slow, because you don't know this guy. But in her mind, no, I can't go slow, because then that would be me questioning the law of attraction. And I don't want to question it, because if I start questioning it, there's going to be a wobble in my vibration and that soulmate's going to go away. And of course, we all know that we've gone through this. That's not any of what's going on. She didn't have an accurate screening process and now things are really awful between them. Like he's a creeper guy, and but so like there's power in us creating our reality to a point, like setting big goals. It helps to be able to visualize something before we can achieve it. So thinking positively, being optimistic about things, but then there's got to be some sort of like foundation under that. Taking, and law of attraction even talks about this, but like, taking massive action towards those goals, that's an important step too. But understanding that not everything that comes into your experience, like you necessarily manifested, it's all there. It's kind of what you're focusing on and what you're perceiving it to be. And that's my concern. I really have thought a lot about just writing a whole book on law of attraction stuff, because that can really get people so far off center. And what's so dangerous, it can be very cultish. They can get so far off center and not realize it for years or decades. And that the level of victim blaming, of thinking that they brought cancer upon themselves, or that they brought getting molested, or getting involved in an abusive relationship, or these kinds of things. And we have control over circumstances to a point. And then there's the whole kind of wild card of things just happen. Even the gal that is probably most well known for law of attraction stuff, Abraham Hicks, who I really enjoy all of her work. I think the whole channeling an extraterrestrial entity is a bunch of nonsense. I like how she breaks down different psychological concepts. I think there's a lot of her approach to certain things I really enjoy, but within like the context of, like saneness, I guess. But her husband died of cancer. And that was a thing that was kind of, I think, probably somewhat hidden for a long time, because here she is teaching about law of attraction and your vibration and like attracts like, and, we attract sickness when we're out of alignment. And here her, husband, who's been going to all these events with her, gets cancer and dies from it. So it's sort of like, well, how do you explain that? Well, I guess you either really can't, or you kind of twist that belief even further to be like, oh, well, it's karma, which is even like another like form of victim blaming. But it's like, oh, it's, you did something like 3 lifetimes ago. So it's still your fault, or you wanted it. You signed up to handle all of this awfulness in your life. It's just, I don't know. I don't even know if that was the route you were wanting to go down with that conversation. So I apologize if that went like took a left turn. Oh, well, thank you, Dandelion. She says, that is the best, most balanced, insightful evaluation of the law of attraction that I've ever heard. Thank you. Well, you are welcome. I think about all of this stuff probably to a level I don't know if I even like, I think about this stuff off. It's so fascinating to me, like how the human brain works and how it doesn't work, and how things can just get a little bit skewed. And okay, so James, let's talk about this. James says, my therapist told me months ago that if I don't have my life together, I'll attract bad women, toxic women. But if I get things together, I'll attract good ones. Not necessarily, right? But it definitely helps. But it doesn't help necessarily for like a law of attraction kind of perspective. But I think if anything, it stems from more of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs perspective. Like if we don't have some fundamental stuff figured out, like if we've got these vulnerabilities that either they may stem from childhood, they may be recent. You know, if a person is, let's say they have been in a relationship for 10 years, all of a sudden it ends, or the person dies, they're lonely, they're scared, they're, you know, they're just not, they're dating because they're lonely. They're not dating because they're at a healthy place where they have a life that they enjoy, that they want to actually share with another human being. When we're taking action from a place of scarcity, we're going to make terrible decisions and we're not even going to realize that we're doing it. And so when we're kind of in that scramble in life, we tend to attract and be attracted to other people that are in that scramble. And I think that's more of like a self-esteem thing on a certain level, because it's like, well, I don't have my stuff together, so I'm not going to attract the kind of person I want to attract. So we tend to settle for what we can get. People tend to relate in general. Maybe this is a better way of putting it. People in general tend to relate to other people based on either their function or their dysfunction. So, you know, it's sort of like if you're a drinker, odds are you're going to pair up with somebody that's either an enabler or that drinks about the same amount as you do. So if we're like, it's sort of like a lot of alcoholics and addicts, and it's because the people are in groups because that's the normal, and that's the kind of behavior that they're wanting to engage in. They're not going to find somebody who is sober, who's I don't know, running marathons, who's doing that kind of stuff. That would not be a match. So this is why it's so important for you, for all of us, to bring our highest and best self to the situation. And a lot of that it just kind of, it's all these Venn diagrams, like they all kind of just like overlap on each other. It has to do with confidence and self-esteem and just coming from that place of abundance of, yeah, you know what? I like my life. I like who I am. I know what I have. I know what I bring to the table. And I'm okay with getting up and leaving if nobody else appreciates that, or if somebody wants to just take what I have. It's so much easier to have that attitude of being choosy than being chosen when we have that attitude of abundance, because we have multiple things to pick from. But if you're at a really low point in your life, and anybody can slip into this, where it's sort of like, man, I'm attracted to that person because they're nice, or I'm attracted to that person just because they feel safe, or I'm just tired of being single. And that's not a good place to be at. Oh, thank you. James says, Dana, go get yourself some new felt coat hangers. You deserve it. Glad to have you back. Can you give some tips on finding a good therapist that knows about toxic people? Thank you, first and foremost, for the donation. Here's the challenge with finding a therapist, and I think with toxic people in general, is all therapists in theory are familiar with toxic people. They've all studied the DSM. They all know about personality disorders. They're all taught this, but being taught something and actually knowing it is two very different things. And it's sort of like, you can talk to a person who has read books on running a marathon, but until you actually run a marathon, like, the difference between theory and application there is an ocean of difference. And it's really helpful as far as toxic people go for a person to actually have lived it, because reading books on sociopaths and manipulation and stuff, I have yet to read a book that I felt has done like an accurate portrayal of just the level of like moral depravity of these people. And it's hard for a normal, decent person to even begin to fathom that. And I think the vast majority of people out there that get into social work or they want to be a therapist of any kind tend to be helpers. They tend to be really good people that want to help others by and large. So that's a challenge. how to find one. I guess on your first, when you first go to talk to them, I would use terms like emotional abuse, manipulation, um, narcissism, and ask them to say, hey, you know what? I've already met with a few different therapists now, and I just would really want to save us both the time and energy. This is what I would like to discuss. And if you could just tell me, in a few minutes, kind of what your thoughts are about this. And if you're familiar with actually helping a person move through the emotional abuse and the psychological abuse and rebuilding boundaries and self-esteem and all of that kind of stuff, and see what they say. And then you might have to give it a few sessions and see, like, do I click with this person? So, because that's another whole component to it, because they could really know their stuff, and you could get in there and you're like, man, I just don't feel a connection with this person at all. I'm not sure, like, it's just, we're not clicking. And they could be a great therapist and you just don't click with them, and that's not going to get a person very far either. It's a tricky thing to find a good connection with a mental health professional, with, I think, any professional in any field, frankly, but especially with therapy. Bonnie was saying, boundaries first, then use the law of attraction. Good point, Dana. Yes, always boundaries first. That's the thing. When people first start learning about boundaries, it's a lot like learning to drive a stick shift. If you guys know how to drive a stick shift, it's a lot to learn. You've got to learn about all of the different gears and the clutch, and that your car is going to roll if you're even on like a little bit of a hill, and the balance between the clutch and the gas, and how to not pop the clutch, and on and on and on. There's just a lot of different things to learn when you drive a stick shift. It's very overwhelming at first. And when you first start out, you're like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do, like, how do people do this? Like, there's no way I'm going to do it. And you're so focused for that first week or so, for 2 weeks or a month or whatever, of getting that balance down. And it's practice. You're stalling your car out. You're grinding the gears. You're learning, right? The cars roll. I mean, my first car was a stick shift. And I remember being dreading being stuck at a stoplight or a stop sign, even on like a 5-degree hill. And I'm like, oh man, people come up right on your tail. And I was just terrified. I'm like, you guys just go around. I don't want to roll back into you, but the point is, it takes practice. And then one day it all kind of comes together and you don't think about it at all anymore. And then it becomes fun because it's just the car you have, and that's just how you drive. And boundaries are very much the same way. Like, at first it can seem like, okay, boundaries, okay, that's a thing. And realizing, okay, I need to start working on this and say yes when I mean yes and no when I mean no. And okay, validation from others is nice, but I can't rely on that. Like, I've got to be able to validate myself and find my own North Star and follow that. And okay, I need to kind of see where am I, if I've got people pleasing stuff going on here that I need to work on, and what are some probably faulty or problematic beliefs that I might have that are cloaking themselves behind compassion when it's not. It's kind of more of a codependent thinking, and there's all of this kind of upfront work. But then over in time, your boundaries, and some people too, they're like, okay, well, I need to have boundaries with dating, but then they don't have boundaries with friends. And then they're like, oh, I just had a manipulator as a friend. Okay, I need to have boundaries as friends and dating. Okay. And then they practice that. And then it's, oh gosh, there's this other person that's been a problem. Okay, now I need to have boundaries at work. And it just takes a little bit to see, for all of these pieces to come together and to realize, okay, I need boundaries across the board every waking moment of my life. And it'll be a lot of work at first, but then over time, it's just because your boundaries are a natural extension of who you are and of how you value yourself and of your standards. And there does come a point where it's pretty effortless. Like, you don't even think about it. So anything that you're a part of, you're always going to be coming from that standpoint of your safety and sanity are a top priority. And it doesn't matter. Like, and you don't even have to think about it. It's just so, yes, of course. Like, hey man, I don't do mental anguish. I don't do perpetual confusion. I definitely don't put up with being mistreated, being called names, being yelled at, being abused in any way, shape, or form, being lied to, cheated on, stolen from, like all that stuff, just done. You know, it's just, it's so much more of a flow. Okay, let me scroll up here. Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Jennifer. Says, do inner critics always have a real life identity attached to them? If so, I wonder how I would identify my inner critic. Basically, for me, it's a habitual reaction to thinking of something. I think most people's inner critic, that is a voice that tends to come from a critical parent, but not always, or somebody that maybe they bullied them when they were younger, or what have you. I know my inner critic says stuff to me that nobody's ever said to me. So I don't think it's necessarily always a person. I think it can just be, I think sometimes it's fear, it's self-doubt, it's just our insecurities talking. I try to do things when that voice comes up to be aware of the voice when it does come up. Normally I am, because I'm like, geez, Dana, really? Like, I would not talk to a friend like that. I would not talk to anybody that I cared about. I wouldn't talk, and actually, I wouldn't even talk to another human being the way that my brain sometimes talks to me. Some of the stuff that it churns up. And I talk to myself out loud all the time, and I'll say stuff like, oh, just stop, or enough of you, you know, or can it? Like, I'm done. Like, don't, no, like, stop. So that tends to work, to just kind of shut that voice up, because I think it's something that pretty much everybody has. I don't know if it ever fully goes away, but it can definitely be minimized with catching it and then repatterning it. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll. Jennifer says, yes, Dana, my inner critic is so poisonous, but I've learned from Richard Grannon to disrupt it, but I feel so silly disrupting it. Okay, I agree. Like, that does take some getting used to. Back many moons ago, 20 something years ago, I worked in real estate briefly, and they did a lot of different like sales training and these kinds of things. And the inner critic voice is such a very real thing that I think most any person that's in sales, they'll have different people go to like sales trainings, and a big part of it is mindset stuff, because this is such a real issue that so many people face, of like, you know, the whole imposter syndrome, and maybe I'm not good enough for this, and who am I to be doing this, and I'm no good at this. And it's so easy for that kind of stuff to spiral. I think it's just part of it. And so one of the things, this was back in the day with Jim Rohn, who I don't even know if he's still around, but he was a great speaker, and he used to say, you got to tell that voice, cancel, and out loud. And that was like probably the first time I heard of anybody addressing the inner critic and what to say to it. And I remember thinking that was so silly, but I mean, I never said it out loud, but I started that, I guess that whole experience brought that to my awareness that that's a very real thing and that you can actually stop that voice. So it does work. And over time, I think when you're home alone and stuff, and you just, it's easier like to just say, oh, just stop, you know, enough, enough with you. So, okay. Uh, Diane says, hi, Dana. I'm so happy to see you back. Hugs, my sister. Hugs to you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's interesting. Daniel Ray says, my inner critic cannot voice when I am singing aloud. Isn't that interesting? I want, that's, I will have to try that. I guess I'd have to think about that a little bit more. I really do think a lot of the inner critic stuff is based in fear, and fear is something that we all have. If anybody's, if you're trying to do anything, it's like the whole saying, life begins right outside of your comfort zone, and it's so true. And it's, if we're kind of trying at all, then we're risking failure. We're risking these kinds of things, and it's just all part of it, and to try to embrace it. And I think the more we can kind of reassure ourselves of, yeah, you know what, it's going to be okay. Like, I probably am going to trip and fall a few times because that's part of it. It's part of learning to walk. It's part of riding a bike. It's part of, you know, every single process is going to be trial and error. And yeah, it's what makes us human. Okay, let's see. Okay, scrolling. Okay. Oh, Missouri Cowboy says, oh, Daniel, he says, I now realize my whole life. Oh, thank you. He says, before Dana, my recovery was nothing but grinding gears. Well, thank you. I, I spent so much time with several different therapists, and several of them were like really good people. Actually, I think probably all of them that I encountered like after narcissistic abuse, they meant well and they were good people, and they did have certain techniques that were helpful. But I mean, and I've mentioned this before, it was this kind of realization of like, I feel like I'm following Moses through the desert. Like, do you know where we're going? Because I don't know where we're going. Like, I'm not sure there's a plan here. I feel like we're kind of just going in circles, and every now and again we're poking at stuff in my childhood, but I don't think any of this is related. And that really set me out on this journey to figure it out, and as much as I possibly could. And I read dozens upon dozens of books on this topic, and I worked at a domestic violence shelter before all of this happened. But even then, like, I don't know, I'm in, like, I think it was a mix of things. The information out there, I feel, is really lacking, and putting the pieces together is lacking. And I just needed, I guess maybe I just needed the pieces put together in a different way for me to connect the dots. And that was what was so frustrating for me. Like, after I found support groups and really began connecting the dots, like on a mass level, it was like, man, there is no need for people to be just wandering in the desert like I was for so long. And that was kind of my focus of like, okay, where, like, what would have helped me, And would this help the next person? So I figure I'll write out all of my lessons learned, and then you just hold on to what helps and then let the rest go. Because you might, you know, you might know some of them already, or you might have different ones. That's kind of the benefit. I think that's the benefit of the community, is other people can point stuff out, and it's just like that I maybe never would have thought of, you know? Jennifer says, I got done writing a letter after 5 years of working on it, to my BPD and PD dad. And my therapist says that before I send it, I have to be 100% confident in it. She thinks right now I'm 60% confident in it. So she wants me to keep revising it until I'm confident to accept his possibly damaging response. I wonder if this is a good approach to him to keep remembering or not. I guess it depends on the outcome that you're looking for. So, and what the intention of sending the letter is going to be. Because it's not like he's going to have sincere, if he's BPD or NPD or some combination of both, you're probably not going to get like a sincere response from him, right? Like it's probably going to be a lot like kicking a bee's nest. So, if he's got NPD, like he doesn't have empathy and remorse, he's blinded by his own selfishness. It's going to be all about him. And if you're looking for closure, it's going to be you having to find your own closure, because you're never going to get you're dealing with a pathological personality. Like you're just not going to get the validation that you're seeking. So I think it's up to you. There can be a lot of healing. I mean, my goodness, 5 years, that's a lot of stuff to comb through and to rewrite and to revisit. And if you're finding that cathartic, like, okay, this is a nice emotional release to just be able to put all this stuff down. I'm a big fan of when people do that, especially with significant others in their life, with narcissists and stuff, to write down a letter of everything that you've ever wanted to say, every wrong that they ever did to you, everything that you would love to tell them, and then burn it. And if you burn it, it can be helpful too, to have kind of a whole people around you that are supportive of you just kind of releasing, of you making your own closure and celebrating and making it into a positive thing of like, yes, this is incredibly, I have to now mourn the loss of the father that I never had. And I'm going to go ahead and just close this chapter. I'm going to mourn this loss. It's going to be probably a night full of mixed emotions, having people around you that do care about you and support you and that are on your side. And then realizing, okay, this is my freedom now. Like I've said my piece and I'm choosing to move forward. Like that can be really healing. So I guess it just kind of depends on how you feel about writing the letter and what you think about sending it. And, it's not about what your therapist wants, it's about what you want. So it's something for, if you're getting advice where you're like, I don't know if this is the path that I want to go down, you don't have to go down that path. So I was talking to my mom last time I was in Colorado, and we were talking about therapy, and I was telling her about my frustration with kind of everything that I had encountered by and large. And I just feel like it should be different. And she was saying when she was going through the divorce with my father, this was back in the late 80s, early 90s, therapy was not as mainstream back then for sure as it is today. And so she was going to a therapist, and they were revisiting all of this childhood stuff. And my mom was, and I didn't know any of this until a few weeks ago when I was out visiting. And she had said, she's like, she said it was absolutely awful. And she's like, it was interesting. And it was kind of helpful to revisit it and see it through like a different set of eyes. But she's like, that was not what she needed at the time. Like she really needed to focus more on like boundaries and deal breakers and assertive communication, and not talking about what happened when she was 6. And she said that whole experience with that therapist left her incredibly, profoundly depressed. And there were no added resources on that. It was just sort of like, let's dredge up a bunch of stuff and then we'll just leave you with it. So I don't know, the human mind is a tricky thing to kind of work through. And I mean, that same approach could be used with another person and they could have massive aha moments, and another person, it could not work at all, or it could have very disastrous consequences. It's not an exact science by any stretch. So you have to really kind of examine, like, okay, what kind of results am I after in therapy? And am I even on the path to getting them? Which can be difficult to navigate when you're in the thick of it. And, it's a tricky process. Let's see here. Yeah, Bonnie says, never get married to anyone within a year after losing a beloved person to death. You might just marry a narcissist who is waiting in the wings. Yes, I would agree. I think, making any major life decision, and the reason they say that, like, if we're going through a traumatic life event like death or divorce, that person on the whole Maslow's pyramid of needs, you're pretty much right at the bottom again. And we're in this scramble. It's like this bomb has gone off in our life and we're not thinking clearly, but we think that we are. That's what's so dangerous. And it's so easy to it's normal when we're feeling that way to be impulsive, to be like, you know what, that's it. I'm quitting my job and I'm moving across the country and I'm going to go marry the stranger because he's my soulmate. And, it's just and then things just start to snowball. So things can get really pretty wild pretty fast. So let's see here. Gerb says, hi, Dana. Thanks for all you do. If a person absolutely blows up, goes back on things already talked about, and cuts you out when you set some boundaries, that's a good sign they're a narcissist, right? Terminology aside, that's definitely a good sign that that person doesn't have effective communication and that's going to be a problem. So kind of narcissist by any other name is still a problem. So the reason I'm kind of changing up the question is because a lot of people really get caught up in that. It's that either this person's a narcissist or they're not. And that creates that black and white thinking, creates this false dichotomy and false dichotomies like that create false conclusions. So if we're thinking, okay, this person's either a narcissist and it's a problem, or they're quote unquote not a narcissist or like normal, then it's not a problem. And that's not true. A person can be not a narcissist and still be a problem. So I think let's just kind of skip over the term and focus on the behavior, because that's what we can point to and say, yes, okay, this is either a problem or it's not a problem. If you bring something up with a person and there's no effective communication, and instead they're quote unquote blowing up at you and no resolutions being reached and all of that, like that's not going to work. So I would say drive on, and blowing up, in my opinion, that kind of stuff, it's okay for a person to be frustrated, but they don't need to get loud and they don't need to be intimidating and they don't need to be cruel. So it kind of shows it's a sign of, different communication techniques, but it's also a sign of like emotional maturity. If that's how they handle frustration, that they freak out and they begin yelling at you or belittling you or what have you, that that's indicative of like bigger issues. So it's stuff hard to kind of navigate. That's not to say, let me just clarify that. That's not to say there's a difference between that kind of stuff in a dynamic between two people and the other person and one person provoking another person with the intention of them exploding. So those are two very different situations. So that whole, let's say you and I are friends and we want to go out for dinner and you say, how about pizza? And I say, how about Chinese? And you don't want to go out for Chinese and I get upset and I start screaming at you. That's a problem. If a person is like needling another person, they're baiting them, they're provoking them, they're kind of planting these seeds of like insecurity and jealousy and like just subtle put downs, and they just keep pushing buttons. And then the inevitable response to that is then the person out of, kind of unresolved frustration breeds hostility. The inevitable result of that is then that person explodes. So just if you're like, oh my goodness, I explode on my abuser, or I've been doing this, if that's not how you normally are, then odds are you're being baited, you're being provoked, you're being needled into a reaction, which very common. Let's see here. Grace, yeah, says, I've always both believed in the law of attraction and been confused by it. I was confused by a belief that I might have caused the rape, or I may have caused a sociopathic relationship. Yeah, I think you're not alone in that. And there's a lot of, I was in a law of attraction group today, and there was a gal in there. It sounds like she's in a toxic relationship. And I don't know what all happened, but she was saying, he was demanding that she forgive him. And she was really torn on that, because it's the whole mindset of like, but that's the right thing to do, right? People talk, you got to take the moral high ground. It's the spiritual thing to do. It's the compassionate thing to do. You have to forgive. And there's a couple of things about this top, and a woman in the chat had said that she was molested by her stepfather and that she had forgiven him. And I just thought, oh my goodness, like let's sort these. Let me just throw in my 2 cents, right? Because nobody needs me like, squawking at him and throwing my, 2 cents if it's not warranted. But so I was trying to point out there's differences there. There's like forgiveness in the sense of like releasing anger towards a person, which takes time. And a person has to go through those stages of grief and acceptance and anger and everything that happened. But forgiveness doesn't mean allowance, and it doesn't mean you need to keep in touch with that person. Like if somebody's, it just all goes back to keeping yourself safe and sane. If this person is dangerous or destructive to you or those in your inner circle, you'd be wise to distance yourself from them. So there is no higher moral ground or higher spiritual ground by, quote unquote, forgiving or like allowing dangerous and destructive people into your life and giving them another chance to hurt you. Like that's not being forgiving. That's being foolish. And so we were kind of having that conversation about deal breakers. And of course the whole like law of attraction community was, no, we can't talk about that. We don't want that in our vibration. It's really important. Focus on the good in him and of the relationship. And, you can be the one to basically get things on track. And it's so hard to see a lot of this. It's well-intended advice. but it's really misapplied. And it gets people all stuck in all kinds of ruts, and then they wake up 20 years later and they're like, oh my goodness, this is the kind of advice I've been taking, that commitment is forever and that family is forever, and that I need to stay, I need to forgive, and I need to be an obedient wife, or like all kinds of things that are misconstrued and twisted and tangled up, and takes people to really awful places. So Sweetbriar says, I hadn't heard of law of attraction in the secular world. In Christian circles, it's called word of faith. Think Kenneth Copeland, for example, and you are absolutely right about it in everything you've said. I had not heard of that word of faith. I will check out that concept. I'm a big fan. If we're talking about this in terms of spiritual, even from any spiritual point of view, but especially from like a Christian point of view, God talks a lot in the Bible about discernment, and it's really important. So that's another thing people, like we were talking about earlier, like, oh, I need concrete proof. I need concrete proof that they're a problem, or I'm being judgmental. I need to continue to forgive them, or I'm being judgmental, and only God can judge. So if only God can judge, I guess then that means the only thing I can do is forgive, right? And then of course that also creates this false dichotomy, which creates that false conclusion of, I guess I just need to stay in this situation and continue to forgive and turn the other cheek, because that's what a good Christian does. And God gave us discernment. We don't have to judge, but we do have to be able to discern a problem from a not problem, right? Like if we don't have that ability to discern, then our lives are never going to work. If we're looking at everybody thinking that everybody's the same, and that they're, that we can continue to forgive people, and like there's different types of people out in the world, and we have to interact with them accordingly. So, I'm not talking based on like religion or skin color or gender or sexual orientation or anything like that. I'm talking about in terms of their behavior. So that's the focus. Like if somebody's dangerous or destructive, we need to realize, okay, we need to distance ourselves from that person to whatever degree you feel is appropriate, that works in your life. But discernment is a really important key concept. And without that, all of these concepts can just destroy a person. Okay, Leslie was saying, so basically we would attract a narcissist by having a certain type of person we are looking for. No, not necessarily. So let's say, for example, if you have a vision board, right? And you're like, okay, this is my ideal man. He is creative and intelligent and a good sense of humor and easy to be around and patient and kind and loves animals and enjoys reading and I don't know, has dimples, right? Looks like Bruce Willis. I don't know. Whatever your ideal man is like. If that's on your vision board, but if you're not discerning, if somebody walks into your life that matches that, it can be really dangerous if you're like, oh, I manifested that man, that guy is for me. No questions asked. That's a problem because you don't know. It's just a rando guy that happens to match your description. Especially, it doesn't even matter if your description's vague or specific. It's just a random person. We don't know. So you have to use discernment, and we have to screen them out to see, okay, is this person everything that I'm hoping that they're going to be? And that just takes time. It takes time to get to know a person to really see. Because a lot of the wrong people out there can seem like a soulmate. They can seem like Prince or Princess Charming. And time will tell. My brother uh, has, for the most part, terrible taste in women and has had that same pattern of stuff. So basically, like, flip the script, like much of what I've gone through in my life, he's also gone through in his life. Not to the same degree, but this very close, like really toxic, crazy women. And he was with this one woman kind of on and off for a couple years, and he felt that he had manifested her. He'd put this picture of a woman on his vision board, and she was it. And she was gorgeous. I mean, she, I can see like the appeal, right? But she had no character, and she was crazy. Like, she was drama. She would flirt with other men at the bar until they would, you know, she would bait them into getting, flirting back basically, and then pretend like she didn't do it, and then would get upset with him because she would try to get him to get in these fights. It was just crazy, and it was on again, off again, and it was this whole roller coaster for him. And we were talking about it, and that was what it went back to. He was like, well, I really felt that he had manifested her, because physically she was everything he was looking for. And then they had certain hobbies. They both are gym rats. Like, that was their thing. They had certain things in common, but the focus wasn't really where it should have been, which is character. Like, you can still find, a bikini model who's a gym rat, just like my brother, who also isn't going to ruin your life or try to get you into fights or is into all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big world out there. There's lots of people, but focusing on character and the more solid traits of a person, because that's the stuff that lasts, Okay. Let's see here. Bonnie says, I wonder what percentage of the population are narcissists. I bet it's big and growing too. Yeah, I think estimates are somewhere for like kind of cluster B personalities in general is, I think combined is right around 10%. So like sociopaths is, I think, right around 3%. I think narcissism is about the same way. Same with borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder. I think it's growing as well. And I think the numbers are, I don't know, 10% seems maybe about right. That's 1 in 10 people. And I feel like that's kind of maybe even a little on the high side of what I feel like I've encountered. Maybe not. Like, between like 1 in 10 and 1 in 20 is, I feel like, about what I've encountered in my life pretty consistently. Okay, let's scroll down here. Jennifer asks, what is histrionic personality disorder? It's so all of the personality disorders kind of within that cluster B are normally characterized as being dramatic, erratic, or emotional, or I should say, and emotional. So those are kind of the 3 main defining characteristics of them. That kind of stuff comes out in different ways for each type. So like sociopaths, I would say like the primary, what sets them apart is they tend to be really driven by like dominance and deceit. It's like the degree of exploitation and yeah, it just, and the level of deceit. It's like something out of a Lifetime TV movie. Narcissists, it's more like grandiosity and at the same time, like insecurity, but grandiosity would probably be like the biggest marker for that. Histrionic tends to be more sexual. They tend to really lead with their sexuality. It's, and there's a lot of overlap. between like the different personality disorders. So you can look at a person and just be like, this is, so it's kind of more like, what are you primarily seeing with them? It's not an exact science, right? But like, and not that we even, it's just interesting, right? So like, as for us, just kind of looking at other people, it's an interesting way to kind of view other people's behavior. But like I said, there's just a lot of overlap between borderline personalities. The trickier one, I think that it'll be interesting to kind of see how that evolves over the next like 10 years or so, with the more information that's come out with like trauma and PTSD, because there's a ton of overlap. And I would say probably a ton of people that are misdiagnosed as borderline personality when it's really PTSD or CPTSD stuff that's going on. So borderline is like intense interpersonal relationships, kind of fragmented sense of self, uh, um, fluctuating moods. But that, I mean, again, like that manifests in a wide variety of ways. Like some of them can be really dramatic and difficult and manipulative and just off the charts, just a handful, time consuming. But some of them are, in my opinion, more of like traumatized codependents who are not even codependents, empaths who got tangled up with an abuser, and like they're not like highly manipulative, like they're not dangerous and destructive, they're not drama, they're not difficult, they're having a very normal response to an abusive situation. So I don't know. It's interesting to see all this stuff and the way it's divided up and understood. And Grace says, Richard Grandin gives some good information about where clusters of narcissistic personalities tend to be located geographically speaking. That's interesting. I mean, my guess would be like Los Angeles has, a disproportionate amount of narcissists and sociopaths there. It's, I almost think it would be hard to not be there. It's just such a superficial dog eat dog kind of environment. But yet at the same time, everybody there is saccharine sweet because they're trying to climb the ladder. I don't know how anybody lives in all of that, and I'm talking more like celebrity, like not just Los Angeles, but like Hollywood, I guess. How anybody would, how would you navigate that environment, and how does that not make you weird? Like, I don't know. But my concern with that, so a lot of people were like, okay, they do these tests and they're like, okay, there's, narcissists. Is there a disproportionate amount of narcissists in like certain astrological signs? Like are fire signs more inclined to be narcissists? Or are, men more inclined to be or sociopaths? Or are certain professions more inclined to be narcissists or sociopaths? My concern with that kind of thinking is I just really want to hammer home the point that like they're everywhere. Like they're not, so because what I see happen is people will start writing off certain things, like, well, then I'm never moving to Hollywood, right? Or no, I'm never dating an attorney again, or I'm never dating a redhead again, or I'm never dating a Scorpio again, or I'm never dating a man again. And I have seen this happen. I did this. I'm like, I'm never dating a European again, or an older man again. And the problem with that is it's linking up incorrect cause and effect. Just because there's a correlation doesn't necessarily mean there's causation. So, it's sort of like if a person, like baseball, right? This is how like superstitions come about. People are like, okay, well, if I don't shave if I wear the same socks, I'm going to wear the same socks that my team, every time they win, I wear this pair of socks. Like, did they win because you wore the pair of socks or because they just happened to win? Right? Like causation versus correlation. Like it's correlated. These two things happen. You wore this pair of socks and they won, but that's not what caused them to win. Same thing of like, my ex was European. That's not what made him a sociopath or dangerous. It was him being a sociopath that made him a sociopath, right? Like, so making sure that we see the big picture, because what happens is, especially when people start writing off, like literally writing off groups of people, is their radar isn't set wide enough to scan for a problem. And then they're shocked when they come across a woman who's a narcissist, or when they come across a priest who's a narcissist, or just even not even a narcissist, manipulative or abusive or whatever you want to call it. That's because it's not on their radar. The radar is not wide enough to scan for that kind of stuff. So these people, problematic people, come in all different shapes and sizes, that they're not they may or may not, you may not encounter them like the same kind of way of like your ex. In fact, more often than not, it's what tends to happen is people tend to go to the opposite. So like if your ex, the problematic person in your life, let's say, was very overt, they were arrogant and just exhausting and difficult and demanding, and just, like that guy or that girl. And so maybe you tell yourself, okay, the next person I date, I'm going to date somebody who's polite and kind and loving and good to animals and all of that stuff. That's great. Those are really important, good traits for a person to have, right? But a person can still have all of those traits and still be problematic. So this is why it helps to go slow. But what happens is when a person gets caught up with that Prince Charming kind of guy or gal, they can be like, oh, my wishes come true. This person is so amazing, that they just get swept up in the fairy tale of it all. And that whirlwind romance very quickly becomes a tornado. And now they're dropped somewhere off in Oz, and like, they don't even know how to get back. So there's just no substitute to going slow and getting to know people. And it's the same thing. If a person if the hurtful person in your life was more of a covert, they were incredibly charming, likable, kind of the Scott Petersons, the Bill Cosbys of the world out there. And a person thinks, oh my gosh, now I'm terrified of people that are really charming, which I'll tell you, for speaking from experience, that's a terrible place to be at, because then you really don't know how to keep yourself safe. Because you're like, I don't trust people that are nice to me, and that's hard to work through, but it's possible. With boundaries and standards and deal breakers, you're fine. You'll walk away if something's not working for you. But so if if your ex is incredibly charming and seems like the perfect person, a person can be leery about that. And then that real arrogant, difficult, demanding person can seem safe, because at least they know what they're dealing with. So it's like, okay, before my ex was a snake in the grass. Well, I'll take the snake in the street, because at least I can see it and know what they're up to, and there's no surprises. But there's still going to be surprises with a manipulator, especially when driven by dominance and deceit. So let's see here. That's funny. Della says, I was in a Facebook narcissist support group with 7,000 people. We took a poll of what astrological sign their narcissist was, and Scorpio won. That's funny. In my life, I have had a disproportionate amount of problems with Libra men. But again, correlation or causation? Like it's correlation. So for me, cutting off all Libra men out of my life isn't gonna stop the problem. It'll kind of, if anything, give me a false sense of security, but that's not the issue. Evie says, do you think that there are two types of borderlines? Yeah, I think their borderline personality is divided up, not in the DSM, but there's several different types, like subcategories of borderline personality. For me personally, just like my opinion from what I've seen, I working more with like the trauma component of it all. And I'm not the only one that thinks this. I think Pete Walker is another one. He did the CPTSD from Surviving to Thriving book, and what's his name? Bessel van der Kolk, the doctor who wrote, the psychiatrist who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, also noticed that. Like, trauma is, we're just now scratching the surface of like understanding the connection to trauma and everything else in our life. So PTSD, by and large, is still understood to be from like major trauma in a person's life, or I should say, what other people perceive to be major trauma. Like, oh, you were in a house fire. Okay, that could cause PTSD. Okay, you were at war. Okay, you were in a physically abusive relationship. Okay, car accident. Okay, those kinds of things, people are more inclined to be like, there could be some PTSD there. Emotional abuse, psychological abuse, for some reason, still really flies under the radar for people identifying, like connecting that to a person developing any form of PTSD. And I would say that's probably the primary reason for the vast majority of PTSD out there is emotional and psychological abuse. People don't even identify that it's, can't even really identify that it's abuse. So, I mean, when I was going through my training, when I was working in a domestic violence shelter, I would say the core of that training had to do more on like intimidation, fear, verbal abuse, and to some degree, physical abuse. And I had a lot of training, and I feel like knowing what I know now, oh my God, like it was like 3% of what I needed to know in order to be effective. So there's just a lot of outreach that needs to be done. And even when I was a psychiatric nurse, we had trainings on personality disorders and DSM and all kinds of stuff too. All of my patients were either mentally ill and or personality disordered. I've worked with hundreds of sociopaths and all kinds of crazy situations. And even still, like, there's such a misunderstanding about, and really, like, unless you've lived it, you just can't even begin to fathom it. So even though it's known, like, these people are driven by dominance and deceit, like they're pathological liars, normal, decent people have a very hard time spotting when they're being finessed, especially if the person's good at what they're doing. I mean, some of them are pretty obvious, like you can tell when you're being schmoozed, but a person that's finessing you is often a lot smoother at it and can say all the right things versus a person who's schmoozing you is just laying it on too thick. It's like, oh gosh, get away. Daniel Ray says, wow, 3% of what you needed. Yeah. Yeah, it was low, under 10%, I would say. So an abusive relationship is a manipulative relationship. And if a person doesn't understand manipulation, the degree of manipulation, of the psychological component of it, of how that works. And man, and the impact that it has on a person, how it makes you doubt yourself, how it erodes your self-esteem, how it erodes your perceptions of reality, how it erodes your trust in yourself and in others. And it took, and maybe it's different for other people. For me, I had to live it. And then once I was on the other side of it, it was just, it like, whoa, boy, like, this is not at all what, it's like what I learned pales in comparison to what is actually going on and what a person actually goes through. And it was for me going through all of that. And then, because I didn't even identify like what I was going through. I just didn't even know that was part of PTSD. So climbing out of that hole, getting out of the hole, and then realizing, oh, I was in a hole. Like, it just, if that even makes sense. Like, I just didn't even know what was going on for so long. And then I became curious about the whole process of like what happened and why, and how do I stop it from happening again, and what pieces was I missing? And, and then I just got super obsessively curious about the whole thing. And it's led me down this rabbit hole to here, but it took me, chatting with a bunch of other people to get all the pieces. Let's see, people are talking about the journal. Postmodern says, yeah, journals don't really feel safe to me anymore. I write in them every couple of months, although I'm thinking about getting Dana's journal. Let me know. I am open. I have, if you're not comfortable with doing like a written journal, I guess brainstorm. And if you want those questions and stuff, let me know what you're thinking of, like what would feel safer or comfortable or enjoyable for you. So I can see about potentially putting together like a PDF, like an editable PDF document. I've been thinking about doing like memes with the questions, but then the questions would be like, on Instagram. So it's like, that's not private at all. But I don't know. I'm open to ideas. So let me know. Well, thank you, Beavis, for the live stream donation. I appreciate it. He says, great discussion. Thank you. Good deal. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to scroll up. Postmodern says, yes, super charming is now a red flag. Yeah. I think it was in the book, The Gift of Fear, where he talks about that, because charm by definition is not sincere. So it's never a good sign if somebody's trying to charm you. It's like schmooze, right? Like if somebody's just blowing sunshine at you. He said, and I love the way that he put this, he says, if somebody is very charming, stop and ask yourself, why is this person trying to charm me? I love that. And then if you kind of work backwards, it's like, yeah, okay. What's the angle? What are they after? Money, sex, I think tend to be two of the primary ones. Okay, somebody's asking about fibromyalgia. Yeah, so here's the thing. So with trauma, stress is amazing. The impact, the negative impact it can have on the human body that's also, I think, going to be something that it'll be interesting to see where medical science goes in the next 10 years with all of this. because the stress, I mean, it kicks off the inflammatory process. It exacerbates pretty much every type of, it harms our immune system. It just makes recovering from anything that much more difficult. It can cause, heart arrhythmias. It can cause all kinds of things. So it's very common for a person who uh, is under a tremendous amount of stress for that stress to come out in multiple ways. So inflammation, Crohn's, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, um, arthritis, uh, you know, any type of inflammation, chronic pain, um, back pain, just muscle tightness, chronic headaches, unexplained headaches, neck pain, these kinds of things, really, really common, or heart arrhythmias, panic attacks, um, just weight gain, weight loss, insomnia, or sleeping too much, depression, all of these things, like it's all intertwined. And it's, getting rid of stress is, I think, such, or at least managing stress is important. It's very, very important. So yeah, Salon says, yes, stress, especially chronic stress, wreaks havoc on our bodies. Yes. Jennifer says, it's really disheartening to realize that CPTSD is a lifelong hurdle. Yes. But it's like what I was saying at the beginning of the live stream, if you were here for that. There's this concept out there called PTG. It's post-traumatic growth. And that's growth that only happens from trauma. And I think that's what's so powerful. So you really have kind of three different people in the world. Okay. You've got, and most of the time, let me kind of paint a bigger picture with this, because I think this is important. Most normal, decent people go through the world thinking that everybody is like them. Everybody else is a normal, decent person. And so we interact with everybody else the same way that we would a friend, pretty much, right? And we know that there are hurtful people out there, but we think that, here's another term for you. There's a term called irrational invincibility. And it's basically the belief that, yes, we know that at house fires and rape and murder and all of these horrible things, they happen. They just happen to other people. They just don't happen to us. I'm sure it's a form of like denial or some sort of like psychological defense that our brain just can't process that bad things could happen to us. But it's a term called irrational invincibility. Anyhow, so we've got so you have normal people. Then you have toxic people. And these toxic people are like walking hot stoves, right? They burn you. People tend to go from normal, and then we kind of even go down into toxic, right? Not that we're like them, but we're traumatized. We're not ourselves. All of this stuff is being dredged up in our life. The waters are churning emotionally. We're questioning ourselves. We're questioning our faith. We're questioning other people. It's this awful, tumultuous time. And it's this whole, it's just like a bomb goes off in your life. But the toxic people will stay toxic. They will stay down there in that mud, living these lives, just living this circle of chaos and craziness is really what it is. It's just chaos on that lower level of toxic. It's no boundaries. It's no standards. It's no deal breakers. It's no self-love. It's none of that. It's impulse. It's living based on impulse and living a life of no substance, really. But when we kind of get our whole world blown apart, it's easy to sink into that. And this is one of the reasons it's so important that we do try to work to release or at least manage our anger and our stress, because that stuff can eat you alive. And it's understandable that that would happen. So we don't want that to sink us into the bog of toxicity. But if we're blown apart, then we realize that the world is not what we thought it was, that people are not all the same, and that the way we've been going through life, some things need to change. We just tend to not know what those things are. So then we start getting new information and assembling the pieces in a different way. When a person can go about doing that, they can build this really amazing, empowering, wonderful new life, a life better than what they had before. It takes work, and it's climbing up a mountain, but it is possible. So I strongly feel like and I don't mean this in like to minimize what anybody's going through or to invalidate you, but what happened to me, even though it was awful, and my goodness, I lost more than I thought was ever humanly possible for a person to lose. It paved the way for me to find myself, to find self-love. Like, there were so many lessons that I learned that I was not learn that I was able to squeeze out of what happened to me that I would not have been able to learn any other way. So it took, that trauma was such a catalyst for just outrageous amounts of growth. And I think that's how healthy people are made. So like, I don't, there's kind of this idea out there that, oh, these healthy people, they just come from healthy families. And these healthy families are kind of these Norman Rockwell lives, and the parents are married and they have 2.5 kids and a cute little Labradoodle. And, they just have this really amazing life. That's nice, but there's more to it. If that discussion about like healthy boundaries and standards and deal breakers and, truly understanding like what it means to honor like self-love and honoring, the difference between like commitment and codependency and all of these things, that stuff's not taught. And I have yet to meet another person who has that kind of level of understanding who hasn't had their world blown apart, because normal people tend to walk around with those same belief systems. Well, you need to forgive and forget. And, you just need to have compassion, and you just need to just love. Your love can save other people. You just keep loving them and you'll just squeeze all their broken pieces together. Like, they have that mindset, and they have screwed up boundaries and standards, and they don't realize it because they haven't been pushed. If they got tangled up with an emotional manipulator, the result would be the same. So I view it as, I don't know, this is going to sound really woo-woo, but, the Bible talks about, kind of, for whatever this is worth, like, the meek shall inherit the earth. And I think in kind of like a broader, maybe more abstract way, I think that's what it's talking about. It's the people that have had their lives blown apart. They're the ones that go through so much pain that they have to grow. Normal people kind of live a life of complacency. Like, they just kind of chug along and they do the same things they do, not realizing that there's a problem because they're not experiencing any pain. Pain is the big catalyst for change. So I know that might seem out there, but I just feel like what we've all been through, I think the bigger maybe purpose, or the bigger kind of work at play, is I feel like this is the next wave of evolution. I know this is going to sound really out there. I feel like this is the next wave of evolution, and it's emotional. It's emotional evolution. And it's exciting to think about kind of where people are going to be in this generation, especially the people here that are younger, like where they're going to be, because you guys are going to be so freaking self-aware and so in tune with your intuition, and so it's just like society hasn't had that before. Like this was never a thing. I mean, for the past 100 years, people, you died by the time you were 26. You had your first child when you were 16. Like they didn't have a life. They were surviving. If the plague didn't get you, or you were worked to death, and I mean there wasn't a quality of life. They're on that whole Maslow's pyramid. They were like on that base level. It was like basic physiological needs. And now, because we're climbing that pyramid, we have food, clothing, shelter, we have kind of some sort of sense of community. Now people are climbing up and becoming more self-actualized. And when that whole bottom layer just explodes like it does with narcissistic abuse, it catapults us to this even greater understanding of ourselves and other people, and so much more. So I really think that we can all squeeze out like so much from this. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing any of this. I hope that all makes sense. Good. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for the live stream donation. He says, I moved over 1,000 miles away from my narcissistic family almost 2 years ago, and your streams have been my steady beacon to remind me I'm not alone or crazy when I've had every reason to feel alone. I'm so grateful for what you do. Pebble in a shoe. Very cool. I hope that you can see yourself as the warrior that you are. And I think for all of us, like, we've survived it, but you in your situation, you dug deep. It's not easy to uproot yourself and move that far away and start really like getting those waters churning and switching up who you're talking to and family, and cutting off people and distancing, all of that. It takes a lot, a tremendous amount of inner strength that you might not have ever known that you had otherwise. So good for you, and good for you for doing what's healthy. And you've probably heard me talk a million times about meetup.com. So if you're still feeling alone, and I guess it's been 2 years, but meetup.com is I'm a big fan of that side of things. You can meet some really interesting people and get out there and do some interesting stuff. But good for you, man. Missouri Cowboy or Bonnie says, I want a Norman Rockwell life. Yeah. I mean, it's nice in theory, but my cousin has had, in many ways, she's been very, very taken care of, we'll say, and by her parents. And then she went straight from living at home to being married. And she's awesome. Like how she managed to still be like such a cool person after being, frankly, spoiled is beyond me. But I remember her telling me one time, she was like, I envious that I just went out and did things. Like I wanted, if I wanted to go somewhere, I would just go somewhere. And I had no problem going alone. I have no problem living alone. I have no problem traveling alone. And she had lived such a sheltered life. Like she didn't know how to do laundry. She didn't know how to cook. She didn't know how to balance a checkbook. Like she didn't have a lot of kind of basic stuff figured out, and I just thought to myself, I used to always look at her life and be like, man, I wish I had more of that. Like I wish I had the clothes and the parents who just kind of gave me everything, right? And but now it's like, man, I feel like I'm so resilient and I can handle my own. And I know I'll be okay. Like no matter what comes, I'll either be okay or I'll be dead. Like, but I'll be okay if I survive it, I will be okay. I think that was the biggest takeaway from the fire of surviving that and realizing, okay, I need to gather my thoughts and get a plan, like a mental and emotional plan. And once I realized like I'll be fine, like that was really kind of a cool thing to have that realization of I got this, you know? So that's got to be hard for people who have a heart, who are intimidated by trying to figure out how to do laundry in their 40. So I don't know. I guess we all have our challenges, but there's a lot. I guess what I'm saying, there's a lot that you can squeeze out of this. Okay, let me scroll up here. It's important. Yeah, it's important to talk. And all of these realizations, here's the other thing to this, is so many people. I remember my mom, when I started having these different realizations about boundaries and standards and kind of deal breakers and intuition and this kind of stuff. And she was telling me, oh, she'd gone to CODA meetings and she'd been in therapy for like on and off for decades. And I remember being like, why didn't you talk to me about any of this? Like, I could have benefited from those conversations about boundaries and stuff. And it was so sad because then she realized, she's like, oh my gosh, she's like, I thought it was just me. She thought it was her childhood. Because this is how this stuff is really, I think, approached, right? Like there's some sort of issue in your childhood, and then it's this bad relationship that you're in, and that we spend all this time trying to heal ourselves in therapy and understand. But it's important to the knowledge that you get to talk to your children about boundaries and standards and deal breakers and intuition. And I say intuition, that even makes it sound woo woo. It's more like instincts, to tune into all of that. Like that's all there for a reason. And um, because they're going to fall into the same holes too if they don't have this knowledge. And so talking to them about it in like an age appropriate situational awareness kind of way is, that's what helps set them up to succeed. So okay, so with that said, I think we are at the point of let's see, doing a guided meditation kind of a thing. And Sebastian, I think you ask a great question. That's a really big question. And it's a question I would love to address, but we're wrapping up for tonight. So if you're going to be here next Wednesday, let's talk about that. We're going to talk about MGTOW and feminism. I would say extreme feminism, and just kind of this next interesting dynamic with kind of what's going on with a lot of men out there and a lot of different relationships in general. But let's have that conversation. So, okay. People are talking about the Norman Rockwell life. Okay, anyways, so let's take a moment and just get grounded. So if you are in a chair, get comfortable. If you are laying down, get comfortable. Just take some time to get comfortable in your body. Let's do 7 breaths in and 7 breaths out. With each breath, turning your attention inward. Feeling your chest rise and fall. And if you feel your attention wander, just gently bring it back to your center. Bringing your attention to your heart, feeling your heartbeat. You are here, you are in the moment, and you are safe. You are completely grounded inside of yourself, feeling what it feels like to actually just be present and be inside of your body. Now let's take some time to relax, starting with the top of your head and your forehead, allowing your eyebrows to relax and soften, relaxing your eyes, your cheeks, your mouth, letting your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. If your jaw falls open, that's fine. Relaxing your neck, your shoulders, and your chest. Allowing them to open up, expanding your chest. And while we're going through progressively down your body, notice if there's anywhere that you're holding any pain or tension. You can normally tell because those muscles are tensed up. So noticing if you're clenching any muscles or squinting or kind of, clenching your teeth or anything like that. Everybody holds stress in different areas of their body. So it's always good to kind of know where you do. Relaxing your arms, letting your arms just go limp, fall next to you. Relaxing your stomach and your hips. Allowing your legs to fall in whatever direction is most comfortable. Relaxing your thighs and your calves and your feet and your toes. Letting your legs get heavy. Noticing how heavy your whole body feels when, when you actually allow yourself to relax. Now let's take 7 more deep breaths in and out, filling our body with amazing healing oxygen, restorative energy, and blowing out any toxicity, pain, or tension. As you inhale, perhaps visualize that inhale as a beautiful white or silver sparkling light, easily and effortlessly moving its way through your body, repairing every single cell it touches, repairing the essence of who you are. And with each exhale, visualize blowing out that toxicity. You might want to visualize it as some sort of shade of gray, like a diesel exhaust. And letting your body tell you what shade it is. So perhaps it's really dark, or perhaps it's lighter. With it, each inhale, that nice cleansing, restorative breath, followed by that exhale of pushing out all of the tension and anxiety in your system. Noticing that with each exhale, that color of that smog that you're exhaling becomes lighter and lighter. So let's do that now for 7 breaths. And now let's visualize a nice cleansing waterfall. Visualize walking slowly underneath it, letting that waterfall, just sparkling pure goodness, just cleanse away any additional or residual negativity, toxicity, stress, or pain that's still going on. Knowing that it's okay to wash all that off, that the core issues are still there and that you can address them, but all of that, those uncomfortable emotions, it's okay to wash those off. That you can handle this. You know what it feels like when something is right for you. You know what it feels like when something is not right for you. You know how a situation feels when it's good for you and how a situation feels when it's not good for you. You're getting more in tune with your instincts and your boundaries and your standards and your deal breakers. Like you have the tools. There's so much that you know, and you've come such a long way. Truly being grounded in yourself is where your power is. It's a big step in healing and reclaiming your life. And it's what's going to take you to that next level of growth. And that's when exciting things can really happen. So let's take a moment and just send some good energy, good healing energy out into the world, out into the group. Just connecting to everything that is nourishing for you, whatever that might be. Getting in tune with what nourishes your soul. What kind of soil that helps you to grow. And when you're ready, come on back. Just acknowledge, take a moment to just acknowledge yourself and how far you've come and how much you've really grown. And give yourself a big hug, even though that inner critic might still be there. Giving yourself a big hug and just acknowledging, like, you're doing a great job. You really, really are. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Come on back. So, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. And we do this every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we go for about 3 hours. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, frustrations, feel free to bring them, and we'll go through them, and I hope to see you next week. So have a fantastic week, and just take care. As always, you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Good night.